Welcome to Life Stories, a journey into the heart of human experiences, where fate and choices intertwine. Today, we dive into the life of Jackson Hayes, a millionaire on the brink of signing a deal that promises to secure his empire forever. But just as the ink is about to meet paper, a mysterious voice interrupts, warning him of a trap that could destroy everything he's built. A homeless girl, desperate and determined, holds the key to saving him. What will Jackson do? Stay tuned. And don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's captivating tale. The golden pen hovered in Jackson Hayes' hand, trembling ever so slightly as it rested above the paper. The contract before him gleamed in the soft light, its promises of wealth and influence glowing brighter with each passing second. It was the deal of a lifetime, one that would solidify his place in history. An unshakable position atop the business world. At just 35, Jackson had already built an empire from the ground up. And tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of it all. He had everything anyone could dream of: money, power, a reputation that made headlines, and an apartment that overlooked the glittering skyline of New York. The luxury of his penthouse, with its Italian marble floors and vast glass windows, seemed almost surreal in its grandeur. Yet, despite all the accolades and accomplishments, something gnawed at him, a feeling that no matter how much he achieved, there was always something missing. He had a life that many envied, yet a deep emptiness still haunted him. Was it the price of success? Was it the loneliness that seemed to grow with every deal he made? As Jackson stared at the contract, his mind began to drift, the familiar stress creeping back into his veins. He sighed, pushing those thoughts aside. This deal was going to change everything. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about securing a legacy that would outlive him. He had worked tirelessly for this moment. But then, as if the universe had decided to intervene, there came a knock at the door, a sharp, frantic sound that sliced through the silence of his office. Jackson froze, his fingers still clutching the pen, a cold shiver crawling up his spine. He wasn't sure what to expect. But when the door swung open, his world shifted on its axis. Standing in the doorway was a girl, no older than 20, but the desperation in her eyes made her seem much older. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted and unkempt, and her face, gaunt from hunger and sleepless nights, was streaked with dirt. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days, yet there was something about her, a fire in her eyes that couldn't be ignored. "Don't sign it," she cried, her voice trembling with urgency. "It's a trap." The room fell silent. Jackson's pulse quickened. His lawyers, the investors, all eyes turned toward the girl standing in the doorway. They looked at her with disdain, some almost sneering at her disheveled appearance. Who was she? Why was she here? And why did she sound like she knew something none of them did? For a moment, Jackson's hand trembled, unsure of what to do. Was she mad? Or had she just saved him from a fate worse than death? 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. He looked at the group around the table, the people who had supported him through thick and thin, and then back at the girl. She was still standing there, wild-eyed, clutching the doorframe as if for support, her body tense with anxiety. Jackson's gaze fell on the contract again. The weight of it seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. He had been so sure of this deal. But now, this girl, this stranger, was throwing doubt into the very foundation of everything he had worked for. Could it really be a trap? Could everything he had worked for be so easily taken away? "Who are you?" Jackson asked, his voice steady but laced with disbelief. She didn't answer him directly. Instead, her eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "It doesn't matter who I am," she said, her voice strained but firm. "What matters is what you're about to do." The tension in the room mounted. Jackson glanced at his lawyer, who, after a moment of hesitation, cleared his throat. "Mr. Hayes, please. This is highly inappropriate. She has no business being here. We've worked for months on this deal. We can't let one person." But Jackson didn't respond to him. His attention was still fixed on the girl, whose name, as he would later learn, was Lily Carter. There was something in her voice. Something that spoke to him on a deeper level. It wasn't just panic, it was desperation. The kind of desperation that only someone who had seen the darkest parts of life could possess. She took a hesitant step forward, as though every move she made was weighed down by the gravity of the moment. "You're not just signing a business deal," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're signing away your freedom, your legacy, your future." Jackson's heart skipped a beat. Could it really be true? What was she talking about? The more he listened, the more the contract in front of him seemed to lose its clarity. The numbers, the percentages, all of it had seemed so perfect just moments ago. But now, something was off. Something was wrong. "Lily, please. Just leave," his lawyer said, trying to maintain control of the situation. "You're not helping." But Lily's resolve didn't waver. "They'll destroy you," she warned, her voice cracking with emotion. "You don't know what you're about to do. Trust me. I've seen it. They'll use you as a pawn. You'll lose everything, more than just your money." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks. Jackson glanced back at the contract. Was she right? Was he really about to sign his life away for a deal that could ruin everything? As his mind raced, he couldn't help but feel that strange sense of dread creeping in. He had spent so many years building his empire, believing in the rules of the game, believing in the people around him. But now, the very foundation of that belief was crumbling. And it was a homeless girl, Lily Carter, who seemed to be the only one who understood what was at stake. The room felt suffocating as the silence stretched on. Jackson's fingers hovered over the pen, still undecided, caught between the promise of wealth and a nagging suspicion that something wasn't right. It was then that the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The door slammed open once more, and a tall figure stepped inside, dressed in a sharp suit, his presence unmistakable. It was Brian Clark, Jackson's trusted advisor, the one person he thought he could rely on. But now, with Lily's warning echoing in his mind, Jackson wasn't so sure. "Jackson, what's going on here?" Brian's voice was smooth, yet there was a hard edge to it as he assessed the scene. "Let's get back to business, shall we?" Lily's voice broke through the tension once again. "Don't sign it. It's all a lie." As the room descended into chaos, Jackson found himself standing at a crossroads. His heart pounded in his chest as he realized that the deal he had thought was his golden ticket might very well be the trap that destroyed everything. The choice was his. But was he ready to face the consequences of either path? And as he looked at Lily once more, he understood that everything was about to change. He wasn't just fighting for his empire anymore. He was fighting for his soul. The tension in the room thickened as Jackson Hayes stood frozen, his hand still clutching the pen, hovering just above the contract. Lily's words echoed in his mind, sharp and urgent: "Don't sign it. It's a trap." But what was the trap? Could this really be the end of everything he had worked so hard to build? His wealth, his empire, all of it on the verge of collapse because of a homeless girl standing before him, shaking and pleading. He glanced around the room, at the lawyers, the investors, all of them looking at him with varying degrees of confusion and skepticism. None of them believed Lily's warning. They saw her for what she was, a girl from the streets with no place in a room full of powerful, successful people. They hadn't heard what Jackson had heard, the raw urgency, the fear in her voice that couldn't be faked. As the minutes dragged on, Jackson's mind raced. Was this a moment of clarity or just a fleeting feeling of doubt? What if Lily was wrong? What if signing the contract truly was the right move for his future? He could already see the headlines, the growth of his empire, the expansion of his influence, the legacy he would leave behind. All of it within his grasp. But in the pit of his stomach, there was a gnawing sense that something was terribly wrong. Lily's face remained a mask of desperation, her eyes pleading with him to listen. "It's all a lie," she repeated, The people behind this deal, they've been manipulating you from the start. They'll drain you dry. Your company, your assets, your legacy, everything will be taken from you. Piece by piece. Jackson's breath caught in his throat as her words struck deep. It was as if she had seen inside him. Seen the cracks that had started to form in the walls of his carefully constructed world. And with each passing moment, he felt those cracks widen. The contract, his golden ticket to the future, now seemed like a chain. One that would bind him to a future he didn't want. Jackson. This is enough. Brian Clark's voice cut through the air. Commanding and harsh. We don't have time for this madness. We need to finalize the deal. Don't listen to her. But Jackson couldn't shake the feeling in his gut. He looked back at Lily, who was still standing her ground. Her feet bare on the polished floor. Her clothes torn and dirty. She was the epitome of desperation. And yet, there was a strength in her that none of the polished, well-dressed people around him could claim. She was fighting for something bigger than herself, something that could save him, if he was willing to listen. Lily, he said. His voice quieter now, but still edged with doubt. What are you trying to say? How do you know all this? Why are you warning me? Lily's hands trembled as she spoke. But her voice was steady, resolute. I overheard a conversation, she said, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. There are people close to you, people you trust, who are planning to destroy everything you've built. They've been working with the conglomerate you're about to sign with. It's all set up. They'll siphon your assets, manipulate the fine print in the contract. And by the time you realize it, you'll have nothing left. Your empire will crumble. Jackson's heart skipped a beat as he processed her words. The fine print. He had never really paid much attention to it, trusting his team to handle the details. But now, it seemed, his blind faith had led him into a dangerous situation. His eyes flicked back to the contract on the table, and he began to feel the weight of the decision in front of him. As the seconds ticked by, Jackson felt the air in the room grow thick with uncertainty. His mind raced, trying to reconcile Lily's warning with the promises of wealth and success the deal held. Could he really walk away from it all? Could he trust a homeless girl more than his trusted advisors? But before he could make any decision, the door swung open again, and in walked a tall man in a sharp suit. The CEO of the conglomerate behind the deal. His presence immediately shifted the energy in the room, and Jackson's pulse quickened. What's this? The CEO asked smoothly, his gaze flicking between Lily and Jackson, his smile icy and calculating. Is there a problem, Mr. Hayes? Jackson froze, his fingers hovering above the pen. The CEO's words had an edge to them, and his eyes, cold and distant, made Jackson's stomach turn. Was this man part of the trap Lily had warned him about? Don't sign it. Lily whispered once more, her voice full of urgency. It's all a lie. Jackson's gaze met hers, and in that moment, everything seemed to come into focus. The room felt smaller, the faces around him blurring into the background. This wasn't just about a business deal anymore. This was about his future, his soul, and the choices he would make in the next few moments. His heart raced, his hands sweating as he held the pen, the weight of the decision bearing down on him. The tension in the room was palpable. He could feel the eyes of everyone on him, waiting for him to make his move. And then, just as his hand finally moved to sign, the door slammed open with a sudden force. And Jackson knew that his life was about to change forever. As the door slammed open with a sudden force, the sound echoed through the room like a drumbeat. Jackson's hand froze over the contract, his grip tightening on the pen. His heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment, the world around him seemed to blur into a haze of confusion. The tension was unbearable, and every breath felt heavy as if the very air was thick with impending doom. The man who entered was imposing, tall, with a cold, calculating smile that sent a shiver down Jackson's spine. His suit was sharp, his movements deliberate and measured. He was the CEO of the conglomerate behind the deal, the very man Jackson had been waiting to sign this contract for. But now, standing before him, the CEO's presence seemed to change the atmosphere entirely. Jackson felt a rush of unease wash over him. This was the man who had masterminded the deal. And somehow, everything about him felt wrong. Mr. Hayes, the CEO's voice was smooth, almost soothing. Yet it carried an edge that made Jackson's skin crawl. I trust you've made your decision. Jackson's mind raced, the weight of Lily's warning still lingering in his thoughts. This was it, the moment he had feared. The choice that would shape the rest of his life. His fingers still hovered over the paper, the pen trembling in his hand. Should he trust his instincts? Trust this girl who seemed like nothing more than a desperate stranger? Or should he go ahead with the deal that promised to secure his place among the richest and most powerful men in the world? Lily stood at the far end of the room, her eyes wide with fear and urgency. She took a step forward, her voice rising. Desperate. Don't sign it. Mr. Hayes. Please. This man. This deal, everything you've worked for, is about to be taken from you. Her words were sharp, each syllable filled with the conviction of someone who had nothing left to lose. Jackson looked at her, torn between the million-dollar empire in front of him and the girl who had risked everything to warn him. His mind was in turmoil, he didn't know who to believe. Or even if he could trust anyone anymore. His gut told him that something was terribly wrong. But his mind kept telling him to go through with the deal. That this was his chance to make history. The CEO's smile tightened as he looked between Jackson and Lily. What is this? A disruption? He asked, his voice dripping with disdain. You're wasting your time with this girl, Mr. Hayes. She doesn't belong here. But Jackson wasn't listening anymore. His gaze fixed on Lily, who had stepped forward again, her face pale but determined. There was something in her eyes, something raw and real. She wasn't part of the game that had been set up for him. She wasn't trying to manipulate him, like everyone else in the room. She was simply trying to save him from making a mistake that could destroy everything. Please. Lily pleaded, her voice breaking. You don't understand. This deal, this man, you think you're signing for wealth, for success. But it's all a lie. They've been using you as a pawn. You'll lose everything, your money, your company, your legacy. They've already planned your downfall. Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Jackson felt the walls of the room closing in. He looked down at the contract again, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on him. This wasn't just a business deal, it was a trap. A trap he had been blind to until now. Lily's warnings were not the ramblings of a homeless girl, but the voice of someone who had seen behind the curtain, who knew what was at stake. Jackson's fingers trembled as he scanned the contract again, his eyes darting over the terms and conditions he had neglected to read in his excitement to sign the deal. He saw it now, the fine print. The clauses that would allow the conglomerate to take control of his assets. His company. Everything he had built. He felt his stomach churn as the realization sank in. He had been played. Behind him. The CEO's smirk faded, replaced by a hard edge as he realized the game was slipping from his hands. He moved toward Jackson, his voice low and threatening. I don't know what you think you're doing, Mr. Hayes. But you're not in a position to make demands. His eyes flicked to Lily, the girl who had dared to expose him. Jackson stood still, his heart racing as everything seemed to slow down. His life, his future, and the future of his empire hung in the balance. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. But something inside him, something deep within his soul, was urging him to fight back. For the first time, Jackson realized that this moment was not just about money. It was about power, control, and the choices that define who we are. He wasn't just going to sign away everything he had worked for. He wasn't going to let these people destroy him, no matter how much they had manipulated him. Lily had warned him, and now, he was going to listen.